Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Dr. Nelson Ogunshakin from FIDIC. Welcome to the FIDIC COVID-19 Webinar series. This is the 17th out of the 18 program that we've set up, and I'm really delighted wherever you are that you're able to join us. First of all, it's important that we actually stress the point. This is 17 out of the 18. We've covered quite a lot over the last few weeks. And I'm delighted people will be able to join us from different parts of the world. Today, we are looking at the unique link, which is really how do we ensure that we have an infrastructure that is resilient in the future against global pandemic. This particular pandemic has actually opened the world to question whether our infrastructure is fit for the future. Challenges, opportunities, how do we deal with it? Today, we are dealing with this subject, and I'm delighted we were able to get speakers around the world to join us on this particular session. In the usual manner, this program will take 1 hour, 30 minutes. My welcome and introduction should take not more than 5 minutes, and then I'll hand over to my president to say a few words. Each individual speakers, we have about 7 to 10 minutes to air their view on the subject of resilient infrastructure. Thereafter, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A for about 30 minutes, and then we close the session in about 1 hour, 30 minutes. So I am delighted once again to welcome everybody to this particular session. Just as a matter of interest to bring everybody up to speed, we've actually covered 16 of the 18 program. In the first one, we were delighted to talk about issue about how the COVID-19 has impacted member association around the world. We also talked about issue about force majeure. What's the implication of force majeure? We talked about joint venture, consultancy agreement. We took the issue about risk and insurance. We also have opportunity to discuss with eminent speaker on the issue of alternative dispute resolution. Obviously, most of us are working from home. The word about digital world and the new norms was discussed. We looked at the implication of health and safety on our people and the future direction of our people. We debated quite a lot on the subject of how do you secure your balance sheet? How do you make sure your company is fit for the future? We looked at the crisis response. Are we doing enough? Then the subject of our communication to our stakeholders, to our members, to our employees, and to our client was discussed at length. We looked at issue about kickstarting the industry when this COVID issue is over. We had an opportunity to bring all the multilateral banks together. We discussed issues that range about where they spend their money and how they're dealing with issue. More recently, we also discussed opportunity to do with client investment. What is the direction of taking and how are they moving forward? Over the last 2 weeks, we had the opportunity to look at the new normal. How do we define the new normal? And what about the issues? Now, again, we are coming out of the particular COVID-19 in different parts of the world. Whilst the figure is not attractive, over 1.3 million people have been impacted, over 380 people died in different parts of the world. And we do sympathize, and sympathy goes to all the family of the people who loved people that passed away over the last 3-4 months. Today, we're delighted we have over 500 people who are joining us today, and we should be able to move forward. But before I introduce our eminent speaker, I would like to invite our president, Bill Howard, who has been absolutely staunch supporter from the beginning of this program. Bill, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nelson. And personally, I'd like to thank you, Nelson, and your fine secretariat staff for putting these webinars together. Under any circumstances, it would be a challenge to put global webinars of this variety of subjects together. In the middle of a pandemic with people working remotely and from home, it's even more of a challenge. So my compliments to you and your fine secretariat staff for putting these programs together. I would also like to thank our speakers for joining us today. Everyone is extremely busy with their firms and the many challenges associated with the pandemic. And on top of that, many of them have family issues as well. So we very much appreciate their joining us today. And I also wanted to thank the participants. As you said, Nelson, we've had quite a few people from all over the world. I believe about 130 countries have been represented in the audience for these webinars, which basically tells us that we're doing the right thing and a good service for the profession by putting them on together. I would like to say a few brief remarks about the subject of resilience today, starting actually with what was going on before the pandemic. Most of us in the professional engineering community, when we referred to resilience just 4 or 5 months ago, we were thinking about climate change and sustainable development and the UN goals and all of the things associated with it. We need to remind ourselves that the issues associated with climate change and the UN development goals are still with us. We still have major risks of more intense storms, sea level rise, flooding, and droughts, as well as fires, and yes, even more disease associated with climate change. And related to that, and tying to the UN development goals, we still have billions of people without adequate sanitation or drinking water. And these are issues that the professional engineering community can help the world address. They have not gone away. If anything, they might actually get a little bit more challenging when the pandemic is over, and we cannot forget that. In that connection, when the webinars end, one of the initiatives that Nelson and I and the Secretariat want to re-energize is the State of the World reports that we've been preparing on these issues, such as the need for increased investment in infrastructure, dealing with climate change and the UN development goals. We will be using social media to address those, and you should be seeing some communications in that regard coming out into the future, the relatively near future. Now turning back to today's subject, resilience associated with the pandemic. Many challenges will be facing us all as we emerge from the pandemic, and actually as we deal with it at the present time. Certainly, when I think of resilience associated with the pandemic, I think of the need for facilities. One of the reasons there were so many shutdowns that we all experienced was the lack of sufficient medical facilities and supplies to deal with potential number of diseases. Hopefully some of that problem has been corrected, but more needs to be done. And I'm sure the global engineering profession and construction community will be challenged with assisting the world in doing that. On top of that, there will be even increased pressure to deliver projects better, faster, and cheaper. The reason for that is the scope of needs has increased due to the pandemic, and in addition, budgets are challenged. The good news in all of that is from working at home and working remotely and using information technology and big data management and such tools as BIM and robotics, etc. I think the global engineering profession has learned a lot in terms of delivering projects better, faster, and cheaper. And that's going to be of great service to the world. And on top of that is health and safety training. We've all had health and safety training before the pandemic, but it's going to be even more critical now, not just for site activities in the construction area, but even in the working environment. I know CDM Smith actually has a health and safety training, mandatory training program going on this month, and we are going to insist on that every employee take the course, document that they've taken it, and by the end of June, if they've not taken it, they will not be allowed to enter one of our offices. And I'm sure other firms are doing the same thing. We will be working differently on the sites, not just producing design work remotely, etc. But working on site, we will be using masks and having distancing, personal protective equipment, and that sort of thing. And that's certainly going to change the activities on the site and the way we do things. So a lot of pressure and a lot of change is coming. One of the final things that concerns me a bit as we emerge from this pandemic is the possibility of numerous claims, very justifiable claims, for delays and disruptions during the pandemic. I would hope that we find ways to resolve these matters as amicably as we can, seeking out win-win positions, trying to understand the positions of our clients and the partners that we have, as well as the construction contractors. It'll be much healthier to seek win-win positions than to get into disputes. So, because one of the major concerns I have is if we're not careful, we will be spending a lot of time on claims when we should be spending time on dealing with the challenges I just mentioned. So, as many people have said in the past, may you live in interesting times, and we are certainly living in interesting times. Probably going to get more interesting as we look into the future. So with that, back to you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Bill. I know you can always give us a very good, kickstart on this subject, because I know that the issue about this resilience is very much on top of your agenda ever since you became president, that the State of the World report needs to come up and we should address sustainability development goals. I am just mindful that, we are privileged to have a number of people around the world here. We've got 4 fantastic speakers. We've got Manuel from Spain, but giving us perspective from all over the world. We've got Tracey, Ryan from New Zealand, and giving us her perspective from Australasia. Then we've got Saville from Arup, who is based in UK, but also giving a perspective across the world. And finally, we have Cosmin, our Future Leaders Chair, who will give us his own perspective. But just before I invite Manuel to take the floor, I think the key point that I really want to echo here, we always talk about our industry, whether we have the right level of infrastructure and whether the infrastructure are adequately designed, over-designed, under-designed. We've seen a lot of disaster that's happened all over the world. And as Bill said, we do now know that we need to make a distinction between what I call social infrastructure and economic infrastructure. We spend a lot of energy on building road, dams, and all of that, which are very, very important. But such thing as medical facility, healthcare, which is required by people in terms of, what I call public health, we haven't done very well in that department, no doubt about it. And to see how the world are responding to this COVID-19 is just shining a light that we need to get our act together, work with the client, and look at the issues in a more appropriate way. So on this note, I'm going to invite Manuel Valencia from Spain to give us his view on that. I mean, he's focused very much in the manufacturing sector, but he will give us a view on a global basis. So Manuel, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, William, Nelson, and especially Barbara for his continuous reminders that we have to be here at that time today. Well, I'm going to give you a few words about what is TR, Técnicas Reunidas, so you will understand a little bit how is our point of view. TR, Técnicas Reunidas, is a global leader in design and build of very complex industrial plants. It's a private company established in 1960. So have 60 years of work and have executed more than 50 billion US in projects. Presently, before COVID appears, we have a backlog of 10 billion US, and then our sales around 5 billion. And employees, we have 8,700. Of which 5,000 are engineers, superior engineers. TR covers almost the whole value of the chain in energy. Oil, upstream and downstream, except shipping and drilling, natural gas, petrochemical, power, and water. And including this, gas, biomass, water treatment, and desalination. We are a Spanish company, totally a Spanish company, but we don't work in Spain or in the south of Europe. We work all over the world. In fact, our clients go from ExxonMobil to Saudi Aramco. Our main center of work now is in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Arab Emirates, etc. But also we are very active in Asia, Pacific, Malaysia, Indonesia, China, North Africa, Turkey, Russia, North America, especially Canada, and a little presence in Latin America. So we are a Spanish company, where we are not a Spanish company. We are playing in the whole field. When COVID arrives to us, we have a strategy to concentrate more on natural gas projects and petrochemicals, because for environmental issues, and also because we think they are more interested. Before we were very strong on refining and refining plants and big projects of 3, 4, 5 billion US. But now we are moving slowly more to gas and more to petrochemicals, where we have also an experience, but we were less involved. This is our strategy. But then COVID and the pandemic arrives, and we have to begin to think in how we can work in these circumstances. Also, you have to remind that the price of oil has dropped dramatically. So the price of oil is very important for our clients, because if the price go down, they have very big problems for financing the projects that we are building with companies. We try to work on these two matters, and we are happy to confirm that we haven't suspended any of the projects we were delivering at the time. Only some of them has been delayed slightly, one in Peru and one in Azerbaijan, because the client thinks that financially he's not able to fulfill his obligations with the banks, and he has to delay a little bit the project. But the rest, finally, they are going on in a proper system. The first days of the pandemic, I mean, at the beginning of May, we have many parts of our workers scattered all over the world. We have problems with around 400 in Spain that couldn't go to the jobs outside, and then around 300 that were outside Spain and they couldn't come back for the engineers that were drilling, preparing the things for the projects and calculating the different things. So pandemia, our president said we are living in interesting time. But I can tell you that Chinese say that interesting time is a bad word. It's almost a malediction, a curse. When you live in interesting time are very dangerous, especially for our business. We have to recover things, try to mix things to repair the problems, but it's very, very difficult. For us, I think the pandemic is an ongoing learning process. You have to adapt depending on the evolution of the illness, depending on the country that have been touched. We heard before that New Zealand is now free, but other parts of South America, for example, or India, or Africa are heavily touched. So they will affect us as a global engineering company. What they say, work at home, telework, of course, it has been a tremendous tool. Most of our employees, they are not in the office. They are empty. Everyone is working at home, and we can carry on. We can carry on successfully for the time being, and we are happy. But we suspect that this process cannot be forever, because we work online, we work with telework, because we know the clients, because we know the engineers, because we know the other people that we have to deal with. And then it's easy because, hey, how are you? How's your health? How's your family? And then you go into the matter. But when time passes, these personal links that are very important commercially and for technical matters will dilute, and they will be difficult. So in a way, I'm very suspicious on that matters, and these interesting times, in inverted commas, could be very dangerous in the future. Second thing, we have to adapt and base our local teams. We have teams in India, teams in Latin America, in Chile. We have team in Oman, in the Gulf. These people can do a lot of work around, but you cannot cover totally. We have to try to find other companies, small companies that help us to check and double check all the matters in a very complex engineering plans that we are delivering. And this will be, this has been, we can cope for the time being, but it's going to be tremendously difficult. Of course, we adapt office protocols to situations. We send that to our clients, from ExxonMobil to our Saudi Aramco. We try to cope, but things were going to be very difficult if we don't find a way of traveling. This is the point, traveling. Germany and China, they are preparing some kind of corridors and establishing a kind of co-responsibility for companies. So large companies that they are sending engineers all over the world, they will be responsible, co-responsible for the health of their employees and try to make shorter the delays of time of moving from one part of the world to another part of the world. But this looks an idea, and they are, but this I think is not working properly. My impression I get from Germany and from China is that it's not working so good for the time being. So apart from the vaccine, and we need to find other ways. And of course, we need to find strategies. That's why I'm here, to listen to you, to learn from you, because we think we all have the same problem. We are engineers, we can work on computers, we can send very detailed projects in computers, but you need to be there. You need to control details from the local places. And if you want to sell, you need to approach to your clients to convince that you are better than the French or the Japanese or the other in delivering your project, your qualities, and everything. And this takes time, and this takes a personal approach. When a company, an oil company or a gas company, make a large investment of billions of dollars, and he wants to have that the other person in the other side, the one who is going to produce or build the project, he's going to be responsible because it's billions of dollars of risk with the banks. And you need to be very handy to this matter. And so I have more questions than solutions. For the time being, TR has been doing well, and we have been controlling the matter. But I don't know how long we can do it in that way. Hopefully, Spain is getting out of the risk area, and we are going to be more open in traveling and everything. But still, we have a very long way to go. Thank you very much. I think that's all for the time being.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you for that insightful way of looking at it. I mean, I'm glad to know that your remit and your portfolio is business as usual to some extent, with all the changes you have to make, and understanding that none of your projects are being cancelled, but actually they've been suspended. But the way they've been suspended is about revalidating the business to make sure you are back on course. The point you raised about, yes, you know, we can work from home, but it does have its challenges, and that the strategy hasn't changed. And I actually pick up the point you talked about, the issue of how do we deal with the staff and the challenges that goes with that. One thing that I'll probably want to come back to you, if you can think about that later on, Manuel, is how are the infrastructure in that particular space actually resilient to the COVID? Is it a case that we have them as good as they can be, or do we need to improve on that? So I'll come back to you on that. So at this point, I would like to bring Tracey Ryan in, Managing Director of Aurecon in New Zealand. Tracey, you and I have spoken before on the issue. Everybody talks about New Zealand being ahead of the game, and we can always learn from that country. Tracey, what's the story? Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, everyone. Nelson, thank you, and William, I'm delighted to be here and joining you in this topic tonight. And you've done such a great series of so far webinars, the 17th out of 18. So thank you for give us the opportunity to come together globally to discuss all these issues that we're ultimately faced with. And if I may, I will take you on a little bit of a journey from New Zealand in the last 75, 80 days. We moved into alert level 1 last night of midnight. And, with that, moving into level 1 has been a fantastic achievement for New Zealand. And with all of New Zealand coming together to get us through that. And now we have no reported COVID cases in New Zealand. However, it has meant that our government in New Zealand went hard and went fast, and our economy has suffered, like many economies around the world, and will continue to suffer for months. And I suppose now it really is around the industry and the recovery period for us to come together. And infrastructure is really at the heart of that, a part of that sort of recovery program for us now in New Zealand. So what did we do as an industry to navigate us through the last 75, 80 days of COVID alert levels? I'd like to first touch on collaboration. Collaboration of industry as a whole has been key. The construction and infrastructure industry has come together to help work through the challenges faced, as well as putting a united front to government on how to best get the economy started again, as well as identifying and working through and help with that sort of rebuild of the infrastructure recovery program. In New Zealand, we have a New Zealand Construction Sector Accord, which is a shared commitment between government and the industry to transform the construction and infrastructure sector. This was launched in April 2019 on the back of some challenges which was hitting the industry many years ago. So there was a commitment to come together on that. And I think that was a fantastic opportunity, particularly, pre-COVID. The Construction Accord was working on a construction and infrastructure sector transformation plan, and that's what we're looking at. But actually, it really regrouped quickly together and put together a sort of construction COVID-19 response team and response plan to work collectively together, bringing kind of a unique group of leaders from both public sector and private sector together. So that's from the major construction companies, the professional services, the engineering firms, the local government, ministry departments, etc., to come together to really work out a sort of response plan for the industry. And really this plan was very much focused on maintaining confidence in the sector, supporting jobs and businesses, and minimizing the economic damage, from the COVID-19 sort of disruption. And a big focus of that when we went through, so New Zealand, we went through 4 alert levels. So ultimately in March 22nd, we went into lockdown, alert level 4, and ultimately worked our way sort of down over the last several months now to alert level 1. So when we went into alert level 4, there was a big to of the Construction Accord Steering Group to really focus on health and safety. So how could we quickly as an industry, as we kind of waited in relation to the response from public health and what was happening, to kind of really get the industry kick-started again and get back on site safely. So that was a big focus initially. And that actually brought, again, the collaboration of unions with health and safety agencies, with the industry to come together to go, well, how can we quickly, we're alert level 3, how do we quickly do on that? A lot of that focus as well at that time in terms of the Construction Accord Steering Group was around procurement guidance and also advice on using existing models of rapidly deploying mobilization projects and reversing barriers then to progress during the recovery phase, but also draw on experience internationally. So reaching across to Australia, reaching across to what is UK, and learning from best practice and experiences of how to really use different type of procurement models, mobilization models and things like that, of how that was going to best apply in New Zealand now to kind of really kickstart some of these stimulus programs, which is actually coming. The other focus really around workforce, keeping workforce in the industry strong. and also ensuring we have a sustainable apprentice program to build a new workforce over the longer term. So that's been a big focus. So I think there's been really positive outcomes that we're seeing that really in a crisis have provided greater collaboration between government and industry. And I suppose when you have a sense of urgency and a burning platform, it's incredible what you can achieve collectively and collaborate together, and that's been something into it. And now as we moved into level 1, we've kind of very much now the construction court is kind of back focusing again on the industry's transformation sort of plan of how do we continue to make New Zealand sector and the construction and infrastructure sector stronger, better, more resilient as we kind of move forward. And we actually have a New Zealand Vision Week this week, which is all around the vision and strategy for New Zealand for the next 30 years. So that debate is actually starting now in relation to that future. I suppose if I go back to ourselves in relation to Aurecon and some of the lessons and experience that we kind of took from it, you know, the global pandemic crisis has tested business continuity plans and leadership, but has also triggered new ideas about the way we work and connect with clients. You know, a crisis demands quick and creative solutions to problems, but also acts as a catalyst for lasting change. So what do we do? So what do we do in lockdown, and what did many of the industry do in lockdown? Well, for us in March 22nd, we quickly had to have 100% of our staff had to quickly adjust working from home. And that sparked a very experimental mind shift to solve issues. And I suppose the last 75 days have shown that we can be creative and respond to challenges. And also with that, we found that we can become, and because we have we've been on a digitalization sort of journey for some time, we're able to rapidly move and our workforce to work remotely. And then during March, while in lockdown, we experienced only a 3% drop in productivity. However, some businesses were ready and then some were not. And at Aurecon, we've been engaged in a medium-term project for the past few years to get ahead of the curve on digital capability on the basis that more than half of our workforce would be undertaking digital work by 2022. However, I suppose with the impacts of COVID-19, that has accelerated that digital transformation at a pace that we probably could have never have imagined or predicted. And depending on how fast we were going, we were essentially compressing probably years of work into a couple of months. But at the same time, you know, that was a great success and achievement and will continue. And I suppose also there've been many, many lessons learned and some positive lessons that we're trying to capture. And that's for me personally, you know, trying to really capture what the experience and what we've done over the last couple of months to make sure that they haven't been lost and they're not going to be lost. And we have achieved things that people would have thought impossible 6 months ago in terms of the way we have worked, keeping our people safe, and how we collaborate. Some of the things, maybe I touch a little bit on some of the lessons and also some of the great things around innovation. You know, engineers are hardwired to problem solve, and never before have our problems been more challenging and sort of complex. And the COVID-19 global pandemic has triggered, you know, unprecedented disruption. But I've been really, really excited and in some way in awe of how our sort of teams and how they have been collaborating with clients and helping them navigate some of the most significant challenges. And again, in the past couple of months, you know, we've seen some really, really clever ideas of not having to kind of go outside. And most of these ideas have been created in Aurecon people's lounges and bedrooms and home working offices as best they sort of can. But I think with a sense of urgency derives significant innovation. But change doesn't necessarily have to be transformation in transformative in effect. And some of these have been very simple solutions in terms of little more of an iPad, which I'm on now of, you know, we would send probably traditionally several people on site to kind of go and do a site visit for a major project. But with social distancing and travel restrictions, that's made it very much impossible. So with the changes in terms of sending 1 or 2 people and just using a camera, that we can kind of link in and have teams looking at the sort of sites, being there in a virtual sort of way and being connected through Microsoft Teams, etc., which not only allows us to continue to kind of work and be able to assist our sort of clients, but also not only reduce travel and budget, be more efficient, but everything in terms of running workshops virtually and things like that. And again, similar to other things in relation to using the technology to come up and use digital models, etc., that allows us that actually many of our process engineers and things like that, you know, normally who would visit sort of plants, etc., have been able to do it all virtually. and actually, again, continuously be able to kind of continue to work and deliver what they need to do in their own sort of homes. And I suppose with that sort of, flourishment in many ways of the creativity of people, that we've been able to do bid strategies, design reviews, and everything like that in that sort of way, and kind of continues to do that. And in some way, yes, it saves money for our clients, saves efficiencies, but it also, looks at our carbon emissions and things like that as well. And I suppose the big thing is we've been very creative and agile and adopted, which has kind of been really, really important. So I think really for me, and just to kind of finish up, is that, it's really important that we capture the great things that we've done, to be part of that. I think we now be more deliberate by reflecting on what worked well and making sense that is part of the lessons moving forward. And I think I'm keen personally, and it'd be great to have this conversation to be able to continue to sustain the ability to move quickly and continue to build a culture that responds quickly to challenges. Because ultimately, we don't want to simply bounce back to where the pandemic went. We really want to emerge further and bounce forward and leveraging from this disruption that we can become stronger, more resilient than we ever have before as a sort of professional services advisors to ultimately move forward with this. So thank you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Tracey. I think I want to just build on that word, leverage on the experiences that you've gone over the last, 6, 7, or 10 weeks. But more important, build on that and make sure our industry become more resilient. Thank you very much on that. I'm going to invite Dan Saville from Arup. Dan, perhaps you can give us your perspective on the subject, and then later on I'll call Cosmin. Dan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson, and thanks very much for the input to what clearly is the topic of the day. Now, can you hear me okay, Nelson? Because the sound my end, you can't hear me very well.
Right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine, but can you hear me?
Yes, it's a bit wobbly, but I mean, perhaps if you can get close to the microphone, that would be helpful.
Is that any better?
It's a little bit better. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, I'm going to crouch down then and get close to my mic. Sorry about that. It seemed to be working fine earlier. Okay. So I'd perhaps start by describing the current pandemic as slow onset but extensive crisis, as opposed to something like a terrorist event or tsunami or something, which would be rapid onset but intensive. And this escalation in the number of infected people and the widespread footprint has been impacted demands a kind of different kind of response. So my first general point really is that we shouldn't want the industry to be only resilient to future global pandemics. We should just want it to be resilient. For instance, in the UK, in recent years, we've had the beast from the east in 2018, and that's spread low temperatures, heavy snowfall. 250,000 people went without. August last year, we had a pretty significant power outage, leading to over 1 million customers being disconnected from them. So clearly, the current pandemic is on a completely different scale. But I believe resilience principles apply, and like the essential infrastructure plays in the ongoing development of our cities, clean water, light, heat, power. And resilient infrastructure really supports all these crucial services which our society depends. And we've seen communities relying on this infrastructure to function no matter what. So there's already a lot of work being done in this area. In the UK, National Infrastructure Commission, and that provides expert advice to government on the infrastructure challenges we're facing, and the resilience shift, and that provides a real wealth of knowledge for those responsible for planning, operating, maintaining critical systems. Of all of this is to try and ensure our systems are able to withstand and recover quickly from shocks and stresses. For disclosure, Arup are supporting Lloyd's Register on the resilient shift work. A plug. It's just a really interesting resource. It's got some good case studies, and definitely worth. So if we draw on work and try and answer the kind of topic is how can industry prove its resilience, I think the things that could be promoted, perhaps the development of national resilience guide industry in the development of more resilient infrastructure. All infrastructure operators regular stress tests to ensure these systems meet this, and then take the actions to address the vulnerabilities, and making sure that operators develop and maintain long-term resilient strategies, and empowering regulators to use these strategies in determining financial settlements. I think the one thing out of all of this really that seems clear to me is that the pandemic hasn't respected any national boundaries, and therefore had to try and work together and learn together and accelerate action. And if recognised early enough, there is opportunity to manage and terminate the slow onset crisis, as we've just heard from Tracey in New Zealand. But perhaps there is a bit of an analogy to draw between this pandemic crisis and the climate change crisis, where it is also clear that many governments and organisations are really acting too little. Now, the UK government is urging industry to act better. That's its kind of slogan. And to do that, we really need to take the climate crisis into account and also be resilient to changes in climate and drought and heat and extremes of both, and the urgent need to transition to net zero. And if we think back to the global crisis of 2008, 2009, CO2 emissions grew back in 2010 from cement production and the like, more than offsetting the decreases in 2009. So I think that's an important lesson there that really mustn't be repeated, that we have to really do better. So on the topic of how we in our infrastructure and how that might be impacted by the pandemic and the desire to be resilient overall, I think it's reasonably well understood that density is the major contributor in making our cities function effectively. The denser living, it provides greater employment opportunity, higher salaries, better healthcare, and the success tests in our cities really speaks for itself. Around half of us living in cities, and that trend continuing rapidly, especially in Asia. So what has that got to do with the pandemic? It loves density too, so it thrives in our highly connected, compact urban centres, really exposed vulnerabilities in our interconnected system, demonstrated how we connected to those systems. And in thinking about what I say today, I did reading around the subject, came across what I thought was really interesting. It's not got a very snappy title though. Excuse me for reading. How urban affects the epidemiology of emerging infectious diseases. This about risk factors in the urban environment. It talks about the lack of ventilation systems, and really is saying that this dense living contributes to the failure for creating infection. And it concludes, and again, excuse me for reading, it concludes that the density of inhabitants and the close contact between people in these areas are potentially spot rapid spread emerging infectious diseases. And the criteria for a worldwide pandemic could be in centres which could develop into a worldwide crisis. Now, for me, the interesting thing here is this was published 5 years ago in 2015. So this is all pre-COVID. So the lessons are all there if we learned. One of its main conclusions was that adequate city planning is kind of the key factor for better overall. Put its considerations into mind as we design things and back after pandemics. There's a real clue there for planning the assets and providing better and more connected and better connected systems. So in relation to COVID, the kind of things we're seeing in design response, they've got to address perhaps de-densification with the sustainability risks of more dispersed. I think we're going to see land use and these central locations shift. We've seen the big in online retail, changing the purpose of the city centre and the retail space. And we've seen an accelerated of logistics centres or fulfilment centres who manage on direct customer. So this, I think, is one thing is going to change post-pandemic, making us flexible, more affordable, more temporary uses. That's going to be, an important part of it. Thinking about mobility, will there be distributed travel demand? Will peak demand be a thing of the past, as we see a rise of travel modes and we see remote and flexible working, or perhaps will there be balance with increased vehicle use? The health side, I think with a huge rise in big data, the increasing use of wearables and perhaps launch of Minority Report predicting when we're going to be ill and in need of help. Perhaps there'll be a decentralized system of healthcare to the home. Perhaps the facilities become much more perhaps modular, can respond to changing demand. So there's a huge range of design responses that I think the pandemic's brought into sharp relief, and not least the use of our space. I think, as we've all talked about, that is with all of us under intense review. We're all working from home in the UK. Those that it's becoming clear that the implementation of the lockdown is far easier than getting out of it at the other end. So as we go back to our offices, what do we want to go back to? Is it computer laden, battery hen style workstations, or do we want to go to work properly to collaborate and meet people and then go home to be productive? And I think there's an urgency to this. If we return to normal, we won't really be capturing what overnight benefits that the flexibility that working from home has forced upon us. My final point, Nelson's around leadership. As I said, there's a raft of information out there and studies into resilience. They all conclude that strong leadership is vital. Leaders in governments, even in homes, need to provide clarity on priorities, fusion, provide reassurance. So these messages need to be given clearly, consistently, and really empower individuals to do it in times of crisis. So I think there's lessons for us all to draw from that. Currently the political leaders have the limelight. Interesting what Tracey was saying about experience in New Zealand. We've got Jacinda there, doing virus free. We got the research scientists, Merkel, doing pretty well in Germany, and Taiwan really navigating successful effort in the virus. And I pose the question, is it a coincidence that all these examples are women? So we can see that where there's decisiveness, empathy, inclusive decision making, backed up with science and evidence-based thinking, there seems to be a greater chance of avoiding the worst of the pandemic. So maybe this is for some greater in the leadership in our industry. Thanks. You could hear that, Nelson.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Dan. I mean, it was it's interesting how you wrap up in terms of some of the lessons learned from that. And I think the big one that for me, which I'm going to come back to you on, really is about leadership being critical and strong leadership, clarity, consistency is a message. And I think you're profiling that all those who are making the right decision happens to be female. Maybe there's some lesson for us to learn from that in terms of diversity and inclusion. But I think the other point that I pick up was the issue about big data and how the world is working now, and how do we make sure that our infrastructure is resilient against the new world. And we can come back to that. So I'm going to invite Cosmin to give us his perspective on the subject. Cosmin, by the way, is general manager of his company, but at the same time, he is the chair of the FIDIC Future Leaders. So it'll be interesting to have his perspective. So Cosmin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson and Bill. And thank you very much also to the FIDIC Secretariat for organizing this great series of the webinars. I will try to present briefly my thoughts in direct connection to what happened in Romania and the European Union during these 3 months. My belief is that COVID-19 in the last months has clearly disrupted the European and also the global economy like never before. And I also believe that this is coming like a domino. We are going to see the effects in the near future. I was reading a report on consultancy.org where it was mentioned that the global consulting industry could lose up to $30 billion in revenue only in 2020. For us in Romania, we had a total lockdown from 15th of March till 15th of May. From 15th of May, we are still in a state of alert, and we are checking the numbers to see what is happening and if the situation is going to go down. For us in my company, Toby, which is a family business, it was started 26 years ago by my father. The main domain is water and wastewater in consulting and engineering projects. I can tell you that it was quite interesting when this thing started on 15th of March, because the decision that I took was to send everybody back home, to work from home. And I can tell you that as a general manager, I was a little bit scared about it, because even if we had all the tools, the hardwares and the softwares, I didn't know how the next months are going to be, and what is going to be the resilience of this solution. I can tell you that this word resilience, even if before this pandemic, was always connected to, as Bill was saying, different aspects like sustainable development. Now it's clear that resilience has a new connotation, and us as consulting engineers, we have to deal with it. I think nobody could have anticipated the speed and the extent of the pandemic in all the communities and all the economies all over the world. My belief is that companies which were prepared for quite a wide range of circumstances, rather than those who were focused on specific risks, were much more prepared for it. And now, as you mentioned, as the chair of the FIDIC Future Leaders, we were thinking how, and discussing inside our committee, how to build resilience in preparation for a new normal. These two words, the new normal, are becoming more and more used by each day that is passing. And I think that we have to prepare ourselves for what is coming. Our solution was that we have to learn from each other, and also to share our thoughts. It's very important, and I think that this series of webinars is great, because it's a possibility to learn from each other and to see how other companies are doing all over the world and to learn from it. We are preparing inside the Future Leaders Committee, where we are 24 members. We are preparing a report, because each member is from a country, so we have 24 countries. We are preparing a report to see how each country dealt during this month with this pandemic situation, and what was the idea in order to create a better solution for our personnel and for our companies. My belief is that after this outbreak is controlled, companies need to look back at the problems that they faced, like labor shortage, like lack of infrastructure, and also other issues. Companies, in order to be resilient, I think they have to anticipate, to prepare, to respond, and finally to adapt to the situation. Because us as consulting engineers, we are used in working remotely. I think this is quite a good luck for us, for our companies, that we did this from the beginning of the digital era of working remotely and bringing projects back to their outcome, and by working from different parts of the world. I think what is happening now with the current digitization trend and adoption of the technologies is the key in helping businesses to survive and also to be resilient during these challenging times. At the same time, I think these technologies have made our job as consultants much more easier by bringing our customers and our work closer to each other. I think that there are two questions now that it's not only for the consulting industry. I think this is there are two questions that we have to address to all the business. How do we support our clients, and how do we support our staff? In the present days, we have all these tools, all these virtual consulting platforms. Consulting firms are clearly able to deliver high impact outcomes similar to a physical consulting when we are present. But we need help. I can tell you that in our company, when this thing started, it was quite a luck that we started this in the beginning of January, like preparing with different softwares and tools for working remotely. But we are still in contact with different tech consultants in order to create better platforms to manage our projects and our teams remotely. This coronavirus pandemic has triggered major disadvantages and disrupted all the supply chains. But I think it also serves as an opportunity for companies to innovate and to innovate the way that they are working. Because of this economical situation, this economical stress of the company is clearly that is going to be the stress of the people, of the staff. So managers, I think they think in these days at what to do here and now. In my belief, this is a little bit of mistake, because you should think for the future, to think in 2 steps, to think for the present moment, what you can do now in order to flatten the curve, the economical curve, to keep the people safe, and also to have the economic activity. But in the same time, you have to think it in the future to how to build a resilient future in this way that something like this is going to happen in the near future for us as consulting companies to be prepared. There are two aspects that I was thinking to mention and to underline today. First of all, it's clear that all the companies, all the engineering and consulting companies in the present moment are getting more emphasis on digital transformation. It's clear that we are investing in software, in hardware, in platforms that will allow us to continue working without no problems. But the second thing that I would like to underline, and I think it's very, very important, it's the people, the staff that we have, because us as consulting and engineering companies, human asset is the key intangible asset for engineering and consulting companies. The employees, with their knowledge, with their expertise, abilities, skills, and experience, are the most important thing that we have in our companies. If you have a good people, if you have good staff, that I'm truly sure that this can help the company to become more resilient during hard times. The experience in my company, as I was saying in the beginning of my speech, I was a little bit afraid when this thing started, because I had no idea how this will develop. But after almost 3 months, I can tell you that I think we worked harder inside the company and better than before, because the personnel realized that it's a critical solution, and the ones that are helping, it's us. It's clear that you have to have a direct connection to the government, to the health officials, and how to do it, like to go forward. I am 100% sure now that having the right people, the right team, will conclude in overpassing the economical hard time, as well as being better prepared for the future. Trust and transparency from both parts, and here I'm talking about employer and employees, will conclude clearly to a brighter and more resilient future of the company, even during difficult times such as what is happening during these last months. So, as a final conclusion of my speech, I would go that employing the right good people inside our companies is the best way of improving our resilience for future risks, for future global pandemics. Thank you.
Cosmin, thank you very much for that. I expected nothing but exactly the same. So thank you very much for those 2 closing points. I think what you said is we are going through a major vanguard of change. Yes, people see digital transformation as the big driver, but don't forget the people. Without the people,
Exactly.
Transformation. And if you get the digital transformation right, and you get the right people who are your biggest asset, then the resilience of the industry will become something that is certain. A lot is being said. Thank you very much, Cosmin. I'm just going to pick up, a number of points that's been raised. I do take Dan's comment very seriously, and I do take, the comment that came through for Manuel out there. If I were to look at it, and I think the big question that is going through my mind, and perhaps from the panel, which I think Barbara will open the chat room now for question to flow through, and I will try my best to try and pick up some of the question and try and put it to the panel. But just before I, dive into the question from the floor, I suspect the question that everybody is asking ourselves is $65 million. Has our industry responded very well with the infrastructure we have? We know that when this thing happened in Wuhan, the Chinese were prouding themselves to build hospital as quickly as possible. And, traditionally we take years and years to build that number of hospitals. They built number of hospitals within 10 days. We heard in UK, they talk about Mary Nightingale Hospital being built. In United States, we had, Warship being converted into, a sort of a big hospital where people were using it. I spoke to some of my colleagues in ACEC who were saying, we should be very proud of our industry because we've been able to help government to achieve that public health issue of having the hospital, having the facility available. Do we actually think that our industry are quick at responding? And I just want to put that question perhaps with Tracey. Are we really good at responding to this sort of crisis? And in terms of all the infrastructure that is required, how good are we? Tracey?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, still on mute. No, thanks, Nelson, for the question. And I think it's a really interesting question because if we look at the responses around the world, everyone and every government is responding very, very differently. New Zealand took a very different approach. Our Prime Minister, on the back of probably our infrastructure and concerned, I suppose, doing the modeling and looking at the scenario planning and where the numbers could go, realized that we wouldn't have the infrastructure or the hospital beds or things like that to really, really deal with significant number of kind of cases. So New Zealand's response was very much focused on shutting the borders and going fast and hard, getting people working remotely from home. And I think with that, we did demonstrate that we actually could, under that sort of lockdown, work very, very well and think very differently and creatively and innovatively. How can we remain productive within it? And I think the big challenge then was really around how to kickstart the economy, but more kickstart it, because everyone, I suppose, within that month period of lockdown, and it wasn't a month, it was kind of 4 or 5 weeks, the reality was nothing was happening. So bar a lot of the backlog and engineers and things are working, all the construction sites, everything had all fundamentally stopped. So I think as we kind of worked up through our business continuity planning and a lot of work to kind of build up to where we were, there was a lot of effort and work kind of going down to take us on and then start thinking around what are the sort of needs and kind of, New Zealand now, we talked about, the borders are still closed, but, hotels, hospitality has really, really suffered in New Zealand quite significantly, tourism and things like that. So there's been probably using sort of hotels and things like that now as quarantine sort of bases, use of different things. And interesting, we had at Aurecon on Friday, I was in a really, really interesting session, which was looking at our design academy and looking at a sort of complex wicked problem. And they were talking about, what a hospital-less city could look like in 30 years' time. And some of the ideas that actually they were coming up with, and in that innovative type of way, was very sort of real. So in some way, if we're kind of talking about the resilience and looking for the infrastructure of the future and things like that, might be querying ourselves going, well, actually, is it this need for more hospitals? And I know from a social infrastructure, we say here and now it is, but the reality of what we're trying to build up in the different ways and using sort of digital, or as we found in COVID in New Zealand, and I suppose many places in the world, in the UK, and Dan could probably talk to this, a lot of it's come down to our personal homes, and that sort of social distancing, working from home, and how you could be healthy and everything in that sort of environment, and what does that look like? So I think there's many different debates and considerations and lesson kind of going forward of what do we collectively want to be in that sort of shared vision, to be resilient against future pandemics or future disruption or crises.
No, thanks very much, Tracey. And I was going to come back to Dan. Dan, you raised some key points in your session, which I find very intriguing. I think the point you raised about leadership, to me, strike a core, and the big question you raised about how our industry, look into adequacy of our city planning. One of the big things that Bill talked about, we've always talked about issue about sustainability development goal. The statistics are there that more and more people is going to live in the city. And that's why you find that urbanization become a big issue. And then the need for the right infrastructure in terms of energy consumption, the right, application of transportation comes into issue. The point you raised earlier on about the city planning, how do we take our, city planning in such a resilient and to deal with it? I'll give you a classic example. In London, a lot of people are now talking about we want more cycling area, because we now find that you cannot put 4.5 million people in the underground because it's not safe and you can't clean that. So how do we build that into, and how do we advise the client to think lateral and to think about the issue? Because that's the only way we can build a resilient infrastructure. Dan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Nelson. It comes down to space and how we use the space in our cities. We're just we're at the moment, and thinking through one different screens and people and how much space should be allocated for active travel and cycling and be allocated for the personal vehicle use. So I think the pandemic has really highlighted or accelerated the thinking. I think they're in that anyway, but putting city planning and purpose of space and the outcomes you want from that space at the heart of infrastructure. So the infrastructure itself is just the output. But what do you want that infrastructure to do? I think the pandemic's really shone a light on that, and there seems to me to be kind of no back once these things are in play. People will get them and want. The other point you mentioned was about leadership, and I do find it interesting that some of the qualities of leadership that we're seeing being successful. So it's about truthfulness, it's about kind of building empathy, demonstrating care for people. Got that leadership. The country's doing alternatively, where we're blame game, pointing at others as saying, well, this is your fault, where we're aiming to demonstrate better than you, with kind of machismo pronouncements. Those seem to be the countries that aren't well. So I think there is a lesson in that. I said, those 5 females, and maybe EDI, inclusive nature, that distinction comes into the fold, linked back to the question we face. That careful, empathetic, inclusive way thinking about people and the way people use space. Maybe we private outcomes.
All right, thank you very much. There are a number of questions coming from the floor. I'm going to try and sort of wrap them rather than going through individual questions, but they've given me some guidance. I think some of the questions coming through about transport vehicle, public space, shared space, office space need to be remodeled if we want to keep, ticketing and keep healthy alive in the same time. Health and safety need to be incorporated. I think it comes back again to city planning. How do we deal with our city planning to make sure that we have a resilient, urbanization that can respond? Another question from the floor is talk about how do we ensure that we build pandemic in the FIDIC contract. I would take that as a separate issue because we're not discussing that. We've already covered issue to FIDIC contract, and we may touch on that tomorrow. One point I was going to put across to Manuel is, I know your business is very much into the oil and gas sector and the energy focus. And one of the things that I pick up in the issue about this pandemic is talk about, well, yes, we cannot continue to rely on hydrocarbon. We know the oil prices crashed, and then that slowed down that particular issue. But other side of our energy, mix is our resilient on renewables. And can we rely on renewables? And do you think the market is responding in that's what I call the renewable market? Because, you know, we cannot rely on the hydro all the time, and we know the fluctuation in the oil prices. Is it something that your client expects you to guide them, or do you just have to respond to your client needs?
This is a very interesting question. The client or the suggestion, no? As you see, it depends. Oil and carbons are very efficient now because they are doing in a very proper way, but they have a very, very important problem. They are polluting, they are attacking our health, and they are making a lot of problems for the humanity. So even being efficient, they are not useful. And it depends on countries. For example, in Europe and America, the problems of this are moving into solar or other kind of energy. But in the Middle East, for example, in Africa, in Asia, still oil is very much used. What we are doing is to reduce the level of sulfur, the level of pollutants in the petrol, try to make it sustainable. But we know that in a certain delay of time, we are going to use gas, we are going to use other substitutes, and we are ready for it. When the client asks us, we are going to deliver what they need for these things. That's why I think the more interesting niche of the market are gas, natural gas, and all the evolution about that, and petrochemicals. Because petrochemicals are, you need it for everything, for medicines, for any kind of clothing, for cars, for many things. So you need to use it. So we need a lot of energy, and we need to do it in a proper way. And you cannot do it just like that. It takes time. It takes a period of adaptation of every country to it, because it's different. I mean, Saudi Arabia cannot scrap oil from tomorrow, but other countries, perhaps Norway, can do it. So you have to do it in a different way and a different system. But we have a goal. We have to make the world cleaner, and we are doing the world cleaner. But we need energy. Without energy, with pandemia, without pandemia, things stop working. Is the blood of our times.
Thank you very much for that, Master. That is really good. Can I come back to Cosmin now? Cosmin, I think you touch on a very raw now for me when you talk about the world is going digital. I think we've always talked about we need to go digital, and even though your company is a family-based company and you've managed to mobilize that, but the world going digital is very resonant with me, because if you take that, one of the big issues that we've always talked about is off-site manufacturing. How can we do a lot of modularization that can enable us to be quick in the way we customize, design, and go to market? This is quite important and actually very resilient for us. And the question that was going through to my mind is, are we at the sort of cutting edge now of this digitization? Can we lead the industry, or are we going to work in collaboration with other players in the market so that we can truly move from this, what I call analog world, into a digital world? Is that something that the young one are thinking about? What's your take, Cosmin?
You know that we are discussing this a lot in our Future Leaders Committee, because and I remember from previous conferences, we always are talking about digital era, about changing and everything. I think it's very important. One word that you have mentioned is very important: collaboration. It's clear that we need to have collaboration with different companies. It's clear that we have to have discussions, and it's clear that we have to do this in order to assure our resilience for the future. What is happening now, especially during this 2 or 3 months, it's amazing what is happening for digital transformation. Everybody now is doing Zoom meetings, Microsoft Skype meetings. It doesn't matter, but everybody is online. The clients are starting in being online, and I agree that you need to have with the client a personal relationship. You need to go to present yourself, to meet him, and to tell him who you are, what your company is doing, and everything. But I think now it's a change, and this year 2020, I think it's clear that also for not only for our business but for all the businesses is going to be a big change. And my opinion is that the ones which are not prepared for changing and adapting and being resilient in the future are not in a good position right now.
Okay. Thanks very much. I've got a question from the floor again. I'm going to try and paraphrase it. This is a specific question for Tracey, which is, I'll put the two together. One is, how long was working from home was enforced in New Zealand over the 10 weeks lockdown? And please share with us your strategy and lesson learned in dealing with workforce at construction site in New Zealand as you move along from level 4 to level 1. That's a specific one. Tracey, do you want to take those questions?
Yeah, okay, thank you. And how long was it enforced? We still are fundamentally have people working from home. So I suppose when we were in lockdown on the level 4, it was pretty much enforced that everyone was working from home. So that was probably, I think, 4 or 5 weeks that lasted for. As we transitioned then into level 3, that really still had predominantly people working from home. You know, schools were still closed, everything like that. At that time, I think the only people that went back to work was really essential workers. So for us, for example, in New Zealand for Aurecon, during level 3, we probably had less than 5% of our staff returning back to the offices. So our offices were pretty much still closed, and it really was essential workers going back into the office, or where sites had been approved, construction sites proved to be able to reopen. I suppose people were just going into the office just to prepare for fundamentally going inside. And even as we kind of created we had kind of, like I said, business continuity plans as we kind of were going into lockdown, and then now we have been business resumption plans as we're kind of coming back down. And even under level 2, you know, at that time we probably have about 20% of our people going into the office. So the majority of people still working from home. Because there were still requirements in New Zealand in relation to gatherings, how many large gatherings. So when we're in level 3, for example, so when you were in level 4, we were very much, it was your own bubble. So it was very much you and your family at home. When we went into level 3, that could be extended, but no more than sort of 10 people you can kind of interface with. And then as we went into level 2, that's extended a bit more and into level 1. But even in level 1, we still have now a slow transition back into the offices. We're probably working up about 50–60% of people maybe returning back to work into the offices over the next couple of weeks. And I suppose the reality, as we described the lessons learned, and we did a survey, that a majority of our people, probably in some shape or form, want to kind of continue to be able to kind of work from home. And there is also, we probably didn't talk about it, I know, Nelson, you did, I think, but mental health and a lot of emotions, people are still going through a lot of emotions and things like that, and mental health and well-being still, you know, remains, it was and is our #1 priority. So there is a lot of probably roller coaster rise, I think, over the next couple of weeks until we kind of get back to a normality, but is a new sort of normality on that sort of basis. Just in relation to the health and safety, and I just touched that briefly, we actually CHESM, so CHESM is the construction health and safety in New Zealand, and with the construction accord, spent a lot of time in level 4 as we're kind of preparing to get into level 3 in terms of developing a sort of health and safety standards and protocols to ensure that everyone was going to work in the industry consistently and make sure that from a public health perspective, we weren't going to go backwards and that all we're going to do is continue to do it. So that actually, those protocols as an industry group, that we all kind of aligned our health and safety plans and everything required on that sort of basis. So the unions were brought in who had already pre-approved, all the sort of industry body groups, major contractors and things like that. So as an industry, we really kind of came together sort of behind that. And I think that's probably helped us in relation to the expectation of what's inside. So then when we all had to kind of align our health and safety plans, JSAs and everything like that, you know, there was a kind of a consistent benchmark that ultimately had to be done. And that's available, you know, go to the New Zealand Construction Report website. Those plans are available. If anyone would like to see it, they're publicly available. So please free to go and have a look. There's some good information in that.
Thanks very much, Tracy. There's quite a number of questions coming through on the floor. One is for Cosmin, but actually I think he's already answered. I think the question was, do you think lockdown was the worst decision in dealing with COVID in 2020? And how do you foresee future pandemic in Romanian way? I suspect, you know, we can spend a lot of hours trying to address that. The fact of the matter is lockdown has to be something that needs to be done. Otherwise, the infection rate will be huge. So, you know, I mean, you could apply that in different parts of the world. One of the points that I was going to bring back across to Dan is, Dan, you touched about the Lloyd Insurance Program on resilient infrastructure. And in Bill's comment in his opening remarks, he said, hey, before COVID-19, we've always talked about the SDG. And after COVID-19, we're going to continue to talk about the SDG, but actually we're going to be more profound in the way we look at the SDG issue. And when he also spoke in his opening remarks, he talked about, I'm worried that there may be claims, and when claims comes through, insurance premium will go up, and then those people who does insurance are the people like Lloyd's of London. So why are we, you know, not talking to the like of Lloyd's of London? What is Arup doing in that particular area about resilient infrastructure? I know the sound quality is not the best, Dan, so if you can keep it brief, maybe we'll be able to pick it up.
Yes, sound isn't good, Nelson, but can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the resilience shift, I'm not Arup, but there's some great examples on there on the kind of thing, especially in countries. There's a really good case study about improving infrastructure for India's rural poor, and the basis of the story is that you know, it doesn't begin with the asset; it begins with the people. Specifically, the idea that if you can link up with the current social security programs with technical assistance, you put the asset into the community in a way that the community can own it, build it, and maintain it. So you blend traditional technology, and we've done that with the resilience shift. And developed over 900 infrastructure works in just 4 years. So it kind of demonstrates the kind of thing that can be done with industry tying up the insurance market. You know, the point of James, I think, is well made. I think certainly in the UK, government is currently saying to government agencies, the likes of Manuel, who run infrastructure, and Highways England, who run the highway, they say, let's keep the wheel industry turning. You know, let's not too hard on consultants and the contractors. But I do William's concern that you know, once we start to then people, employers, are going to have a bit of a field day opening the book and seeing what actually went on. And I really hope we don't go there. I think government has treated us pretty fairly to date, and if we spend focusing on who did what when during COVID, we won't do this build back better, and we won't focus on the SDGs and put that investment be made, which is about carbon reduction in my.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I think the key word I was looking for you to talk about is net zero, but I think you mentioned that in passing earlier on. So thank you very much. At this point, I am mindful of the time. There's a lot of questions coming through the floor. Most of it are very supportive and encouraging what FIDIC is doing as a good thing to do for sharing all these experiences and knowledge and how people are dealing things in different parts of the world. And I'm just being very kind actually to try and sidepost some of the response to the question about, you know, some of our activity or on the YouTube and what is coming through. At this point in mind, we've got roughly about 5 minutes, and I just want to go through all the panel speaker and actually said, you know, yes, FIDIC has done so much over the last, 10, 12 weeks. We've covered varieties of issues, and we are producing a lot of document and guidance note. And Cosmin talked about the future leader producing something. And one of the things I always encourage the panelists when they go is to look at what it is they are doing in their company or in their association that we can share on a global platform, because that's what FIDIC is all about. I hear the word collaboration, that keeps coming out. So it's something I want to do. So I'm going to start off with Cosmin and say, what will be your one statement to FIDIC of things we need to continue to do beyond this particular COVID series program? Cosmin, yours first, please.
In one sentence, I would say that I am glad of how us as Future Leaders Committee are collaborating with the FIDIC board, and that our voice is heard.
Thank you very much. Dan, can I pull you to this up? What's your recommendation? What should we be doing? You're a member of the ACE UK, and ACE UK is a member of FIDIC. So you are part of the FIDIC family. So what should we be doing?
Yeah, I'd perhaps sum it up, Nelson, as I think we all need to do all we can to influence policy, drive and best practice, all aimed at making systems more resilient and sustainable.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Manuel. What's your advice? You're part of the Spanish association, and FIDIC is yours. What should we be doing in the manufacturing and the heavy industry side of it? How should we be well positioned to make sure we can respond to the future?
Let me, my microphone is open. Now, what we need is to talk, to cooperate, because everything we have discovered with this crisis is globally. We cannot go back to every nation's solution. So we need to talk and find ways of solving the problems, because we have almost the same problems and we need solutions. And these solutions should be done in cooperation with another country, because we are moving products, ideas, engineering projects from one country to another. So we need to talk, we need to cooperate, we need to cooperate with the governments and push the governments in the right decision, because sometimes the governments are not doing very well. We have been that some countries, let's say developed countries, has not doing very well in the coronavirus crisis. So we need to find ways to know solutions, Korean solutions, New Zealand solutions, whatever it is, and find ways to solve the problem, or even Portugal solutions. And this should be exchanged between one another. Try to stop a little bit of magnification or trying to exaggerate some of the problems, and try to solve and concentrate on facts.
Thank you.
This could be a solution.
Thank you very much. Tracey, I'm going to put you on the spot. You know, New Zealand is the shining example. What's your word of advice to us, to FIDIC, to MA, and the rest of the consulting industry?
I think everyone's touched on it. You know, I think one thing is the whole collaboration piece. I think William's address right at the start, talking about climate change, resilience, sustainable development goals and things like that. These are such huge issues on top of having a global pandemic that we can't do these things in isolation. And we're very much, yes, New Zealand, we're nearly 11:30 tonight, but we're incredibly connected. We're as a global way, and having this sort of conference, we're just kind of connected. So how do we continue to have these sort of sessions, share our thought leadership, share the lessons, share the insights, bring the innovation, and how we can collaborate and connect and things like that is more important than ever. And I think with the use of digital and other different ways is important. But also I think playing to our strengths, as engineers and the world we're living, there's pioneers, there's innovators, sense makers, creatives, things like that. And this ultimately is playing to our sort of strengths, to really think about, we have common values and sort of goals of what we want to achieve. So how do we do that collectively? And ultimately, think around what is the sort of vision and outcome that we really want to achieve, which is really around human-centric designs in that sort of way. So I think that's really important not to forget that too.
Thank you very much, Tracey. I really welcome that. Bill, I bet you thought I wasn't going to call you. I am going to call you.
Thank you, Nelson. And
one sentence to wrap up. Thank you, Bill.
You always ask me in one sentence to wrap these up, and it's so difficult to do. My thoughts. FIDIC strives to be the voice of the global engineering community. What we heard today and what we've heard in the last 16 webinars has emphasized that need in our heads. We really need to do everything we can to assist our member associations in speaking with and communicating with all stakeholders, government, international development banks, the construction community, all stakeholders, to encourage cooperative, collaborative resolution of issues that have come out of the pandemic, looking for win-wins, and also to continue to communicate the need for post-pandemic infrastructure to help us with economies, but also to address the many needs, never losing sight of the Sustainable Development Goals and the state of the world related to infrastructure needs, sanitation, drinking water, etc. All of that is kind of easy to say, perhaps, but we really need to focus on everything we can do to achieve that objective. I didn't put a period in any of that, Nelson, so I'll declare it as one sentence.
Thank you very much, Bill. I mean, on this note, I mean, I cannot summarize any better than what Bill's done, but let me put it into context. We've done 16. This is the 17th webinar, and on Thursday, we'll do the 18th one to wrap up this series. Incidentally, Cosmin didn't mention this, but the future leaders are going to kickstart their webinar over the next 3 weeks. On Wednesday, one tomorrow, then one in upper week, and then one in the third week. And that would be insightful to looking at why people should be part of the future leaders. If you are not involved in young professionals in your country, if you don't have similar association, or if you are looking into it and you've already support this initiative, a fantastic opportunity to listen to the future leaders tomorrow and next week Wednesday and the upper week Wednesday. So please join us. What can I say? It's been an interesting session. Bill summarized it. He gave us a kickstart at the beginning, and I'm glad that he's here once again to support us to summarize, the aftermath. I did mention that Andy will put his pen to paper very quickly, and there will be a one-pager. This particular document will also be available on our YouTube, and whereby people can listen to it again and again. You can signpost it. At this point, I really want to talk about the next one, which is going to be on Thursday, which is a pandemic that's changed the world. We've covered a number of topics. Some of them I covered at the beginning of this particular webinar, and we'll be looking at lessons learned from this issue in our sector. I will be bringing a surprise to you. Don't miss it on Thursday. I am going to get Bill there. He promised not to miss any. He's attended all 17, and I'm expecting to be there for the 18th. But what I intend to do is to bring a number of key people with us on Thursday, where we'll look through all the journey that we've traveled and all the experiences that we've discussed and all the issues we've raised about how do we work together in an industry that is sustainable, that is keeping the world alive, which is our industry. What lesson can we learn? What lesson have we learned? And how do we move forward? So I hope on Thursday we'll be able to cover that. At this point, I want to use the opportunity to thank all the participants from wherever you are around the world. Over 500 people, who's been involved in this particular conversation. I want to thank Bill for his energy and enthusiasm and continued support for this initiative. Bill, thank you very much, considering I have to wake you up early in the morning. Tracey, who is time to go to bed, but yet he's got family and is giving time to be with us in New Zealand. You're shining example, Tracey, and we're looking forward to your continuous involvement in our sustainability development goal as the new chair for that. Welcome on board. Dan, thank you very much for your support. I do like the Arup approach and your way of getting the message across, even though you are in Cardiff. We're not going to use that against you. You're a part of us, and we really enjoy your contribution. Thank you very much. Marcel, thank you very much for your support, your global perspective, even though you are based in Spain, and I'm glad your business is still going in the right direction. So Cosmin, the floor is going to be yours from tomorrow and the week after and the week after. So the future leaders, thank you very much. I want to say thank you to all my staff, particularly Barbara, Andy, and all those people, Nadia, who are behind the scene, making sure our communication is up and ready and you are hearing from us. So thank you very much for all that you've done. On this note, I want to wish you well wherever you are. Keep safe and God bless you. Thank you.